Hello, this is Tom Watson reporting with Week 7 for the Mike Watt and the Missing Men North American Hyphenated-Man Tour of 2011. Week 7 begins in the morning of April 21st, and it's a Thursday, and we are driving out of Lawrence, Kansas. It's also a long drive that we are not. It's officially our day off. I know we had a day off earlier, which came about after the tour had been booked. But this was the one day off planned in the tour for the drive to get from Lawrence to Dallas. So we say goodbye to Kevin and Sarah and Caden and Caitlin and start rolling. It's a long drive, but it's a straight drive, and it's, fairly clear weather. So we find a place about 100 miles east of the border of Colorado to get a Motel 6 and call it a night and get some sleep. Raul and I head over to the Mexican place across the street in a Quality Inn or something like that has a little Mexican restaurant that we get some food in, and Bob shows up for a little bit, and we head back over to the rooms, and that's about it. We all get to bed pretty early. The next morning is the rest of the drive to Denver, and we get to the Larimer Lounge around 3:30, something like this. A little early, but there is someone at the bar, and we get to hang out there for a while before the sound person comes to set us up, and we load in and get things going. There's also some event happening on the block where it's apparently like it's a form of circus, they called it. It's kind of like an outdoor party / goth. I don't know. It looks like a lot of handmade objects, whether it's jewelry or dolls or some form of clothing or art stuff that people are trying to sell, and some loud music coming from a portable music truck, and a hot dog stand, and etc. and so forth, so on. We do our setup and sound check, and Bob Teagan shows up, a friend of ours from Detroit who videotapes all the gigs I may have mentioned earlier. We stayed at his place outside of Detroit, and he shows up at the gig with his camera and a couple friends of his, another friend named Bob, and someone named Scott, and I believe, and so we have some talking, and by the time the gig rolls around, I'm kind of worn out, but we go with it, and it works out good, I think. I'm trying to think if I saw anyone I knew, but I don't believe so. Maybe a few people that had been to other gigs that said hi, but none of my relatives or anyone that I knew from before show up. Anyway, so we're invited over to Jay Fox's place for the night, and before I fall asleep, he shows me some of his artwork and gives me a CD of his band, and we get to bed, but it was kind of a late one, so I think I get to bed about 4, and we get up around 8:30 or 9, and that overwhelming bacon smell is like kind of luring you out of bed, or lures me out of bed, and we pound some coffee, and I get a little sleep first thing in the van because it's kind of a long drive to Salt Lake City, and we have to switch off behind the wheel, and so I try to rest a little bit before my shift. Anyhow, going through Wyoming is a little bit of a concern because it can be really snowy and icy and windy and cold, but it turns out to be okay weather for us, so we get through pretty good and get to Salt Lake City and to this place called the Complex, which really is a complex. It's kind of an industrial, well, it is an industrial structure that has 4 separate live spaces as far as I know of, and they were all going at the same time, so it's crazy kind of I don't know, almost a nightmare kind of situation of interesting that they can do this, but also confusing and confounding. Different gigs in each venue that are all kind of interconnected by some habit trail kind of, cavern hallways. But before everything, we do our sound check, and etc., and try to find a place to put our stuff down and rest a little bit. But Raul and I decided to go for a walk and look for some food, and we find a Thai place, which is a little outside our normal budget, but we decided to go with it since we can't find anything else, and we both kind of feel the need for, to treat ourselves to a good meal, and it was good. Walking back, I bumped into a couple of guys who recognized me and handed me a little bag full of homies for the dashboard, so that was cool, and a CD to listen to. And I give Caroline a call, and at that point, head back to the gig and talk to Raul for a little while, and watch a little bit of the groups playing before us, and do our thing. We head out of the St. Louis, Salt Lake City gig, and meet up with our friend Don Dalton, who we always stay with when we're in Salt Lake City, and good friend of Mike's from San Pedro, and has been living in Salt Lake City for years and has a great place, and we always stay with him. He's got a couple of rooms, and I think I head right to bed, fall asleep, and wake up to a quick breakfast, get some coffee, get in the van, say goodbye to Don, kind of say goodbye to the house because I think he's either renting it out or thinking of selling it and moving. But what a great place, and what a great guy. Very much appreciated all the years staying with him and in that nice place. I don't know. If he's not there, I don't know if I'd want to go back to Salt Lake City. So, anyhow, we get in the van and start driving towards Boise, which is another drive. These are all getting to be longer drives once we get west, and we pull into Boise, about 4 o'clock, I guess, maybe 5. The Neuralex is a nice little club. We've played there many times. It's also expanded over the years, so it's getting to be a bit more, a larger capacity, and maybe a bigger, slightly more large venue for, to get more people in there. And there's a record store right next door that's great. It has a coffee shop, cafe built into it, so it's a nice little stretch of road there. And the gigs are always fun there, and we see our friends Bart and Steffi, and we always stay with them. And so we see Bart and Steph, and we're hanging, and there's some pool being played, and before long we play our gig. There was another group that I can't remember the name. I'm spacing out on the names of bands right now. That's why I'm just skipping past that. But the show is fun, and we head back to Bart and Steph's place, and I get the couch in the basement, which has been sort of renovated since there was some flooding that had happened, I guess earlier in the year or maybe last year, and so it's a little bit different than when I was last there, but I slept on the same basic, it's a new couch, but in the same place as the old couch, and got some sleep. And actually, Bart made his famous pizza before we all hit the sack. He has this great pizza cooking device, which is it's a turntable that cooks the top of the pizza and the bottom at the same time as it rotates, and he just does it perfectly. He makes the crust, the dough from scratch, and great sauce, and it's got the right touch. So that's much appreciated, and I sleep well. In the morning, it's a cold and wet morning, and we all pile out, and we have to make a big drive to Portland from Boise, and so we're just rolling. And by the time we get to Portland, there's heavy winds all through the plains of the eastern half of Oregon and through Pendleton, and really strong winds and a little bit of rain, and we just take our time, but we get there right on time, and we load in and do our thing, and Richard Meltzer shows up, friend of Mike's, acquaintance, and a great writer, and someone Mike had worked on a project recently called Spiel, where he's reading his poetry and music, the background music with Mike, and Yuko and Shimi from Migu, the Japanese group Migu, and among other things, and many other projects they do. But a great recording that Mike's label Clenched Wrench will be putting out, Spielgusher. Anyway, so Richard Meltzer is there, and they have dinner. He and Mike have dinner, and Raul and I and Pete have dinner. But later on, in the green room, we're all hanging out and get a chance to talk with Richard, and it's really nice conversation. It's fun to either overhear what they're talking about or contribute something and talk about the recordings and etc. Very nice guy and interesting dude. Also, a friend of mine, Kyle Newell, is living in Portland. I haven't seen him in a while. Actually, I saw him a few months earlier with Lou Barlow, but before that it had been quite a while. So we get in touch and make plans to cross paths. Also, Saul Cole and Dee Dee and Eric, Dayton, and Tamara, and their friend Lindsay. I didn't get a chance to speak with her much, so sorry if that's wrong. And we have some nice just catch-up stuff with some old friends that I have there in Portland. And the Doug Fir is a nice place to play. It just feels comfortable. And I think the sound is pretty good. And Mick does a good job. He's an interesting dude. We have a conversation about the difference between Mick and Mitch, and the fact that sometimes he's called Mitch and he can't understand why, because he's in his entire life he's never met a person named Mitch, so can't understand why people might mistaken his name Mick for the name Mitch. And then I try to explain that actually I do know a couple of people named Mitch, so I could see how that could be an accident. Anyway, boring little conversation, but interesting in the moment. Let me see. So, we go and stay with Eric and Tamara, and we've been staying with Eric for a while. I know Eric through Bill Jennings and Sightworks, the place where Mike has his podcast server set up through them, or however that works. But I've known Bill Jennings a long time, and he and Eric work there or run the place on some level. I'm not sure in what capacity, but in any case, staying at Eric's place, Eric and Tamara's place, is always very nice, comfortable. But we do get up early to head out, and Eric takes Raul and I by Tamara's place, Orange, hairstyling salon, or hair cutting salon, I guess you'd call it, and very nice place. And we do some document printing because we have to head into Canada. And anyhow, so we get in the van and we roll north, and before we get to the border, we stop in Bellingham to get a motel room so that we can drop off all of our merchandise, not bring it into the country and not have to deal with all that stuff again, or avoid having to deal with the merchandise tariffs and counting and having them pull everything out of boxes, etc. And so we also set Bob up with the merch in the room so that he can just be there with it. And we all roll into Vancouver, and it turns out that it's by the time we get to the club, we get through the border pretty easily, and actually amazingly easily. And we get to the venue, and there's a huge hockey playoff between Vancouver. It's the final game, Game 7 of the playoffs, between Vancouver and Chicago. And so there's the club is only blocks away from the hockey arena, and so it's just this crazy buzz outside, and everyone walking around with jerseys and planning the look of planning to get drunk and scream in their faces as they're walking past. But we get in, load in, we get a nice little parking spot in front of the venue and do our thing. And Pat, the sound man, Raul, and I had worked with before with Lou Barlow and Elisa and Amanda? No. Well, anyway, a couple nice ladies working there and helping us out. In any case, the show becomes delayed. We're playing with a group called the Ford Pier Vengeance Trio, but the show is getting delayed because of this hockey game that's going on. And everyone's glued to the television, and then finally, it looks like Vancouver's going to win it, and within the last minute, they get the other Chicago scores, and so it goes into this overtime thing, which is kind of an undetermined length of time. It's essentially whoever scores the next goal wins, but that could go on for as long as that takes. So the show is getting kind of determined by that situation, and finally the gig gets going. Vancouver wins, by the way, and everyone's excited, and they're screaming in the streets, and we can get the gig started. And the Ford Pier Vengeance Trio have a really great set of music, and they slip a little Minutemen tune into one of their tunes. They put the end of cut in the middle of one of their songs, which is kind of nicely done. And by the time we play, it's getting later on, and we do a good job, but we still have to pack out and drive back over the border. It's a couple of hours until we get back to Bellingham, and so it's, well into 2:30, maybe even 3 by the time we're in the room and ready to go to sleep. But everything's fine. Bob's there, and we get through safely, and no problems at the border, so that's great. The next morning, though, we get up and we head towards Seattle, which is only a couple of hours away, and we get to hang out with a friend of Peak's named Jeff, who makes these gnomes. So we're checking out all his, ceramic gnomes that he sells online. And I don't know the company name, or I'd say it, but it's pretty interesting. And we find out we have to be at the venue, the Triple Door, really early because of it's an early show. We're playing at 8:20. So we head over there, and it's a fancy place, it's a sit-down dinner club type joint where, I don't know, it must be, every table has a place setting already going. There's literally no standing room or dance floor or anything, so it's kind of a loungy place. But really capable people working there, and helpful, and it's a comfortable place. And Mike hears from Eddie Vedder that he wants to come and join us on a gig, or on one of the songs. He and Dave Grohl Dave Grohl's in town with Pat Smear, I guess a Foo Fighters thing, doing something somewhere. I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but they all want to get together and do a version of Big Train, or they suggest that, and so we're trying to hook that up, make sure it happens, because that would be fun. And after a while, Ed shows up, and he's a super sweet guy, someone I've met once or twice, and remembers me by name, which is a nice thing when you meet people of that kind of, that have that kind of exposure, and you realize how, it's not gone to his head or anything. He seems extremely humble and friendly and very warm guy. And we have a little talk, conversation, and he and Raul and I, and then we sit through the first group. I also have to say that Sandy and Steve show up, and I hang out with them. Sandy Glaze, someone I've known from early, punk rock days. She lived in Hermosa Beach, and we just have a long history of knowing each other. And Steve is her husband, someone I've got to know over the years. And I guess we always stay at their place when we're in Seattle. I feel like if we didn't, we would be doing something wrong. It would probably it wouldn't be the same. So I hang out with Sandy and Steve, and I see Sandy's mom, who just recently got married. So we have a brief conversation, and the show gets started really early, and Eddie's ready to play. Somewhere between during our set, Dave Grohl and Pat Smear show up, so that by the end of our little encore, they run on and do Big Train, and then at the end of the gig, or very end, Raul and I come back on, and we all do a kind of a whacked out version of Funhouse, and it's a really fun night, and it's kind of one of those nights that you don't get many of these in a lifetime. Somehow this is just one of those special fun times. Great to hang out with them, and it was just fun and spontaneous, and you couldn't have planned it in a better way somehow. We have a conversation afterwards before loading out, and I meet Jill, Ed's wife, and it turns out that she's from Manhattan Beach too, because Mike always says at the end of the set, "From Manhattan Beach, Tom Watson." And so she came up and said hi, and we've been from the same high school, etc., so forth. She's from the hill section, I'm from the tree section. Anyhow, we head over to Steve and Sandy's, and we have our normal kind of chill out, come down conversation before hitting the sack, and it's always great to be with them, Sandy and Steve, and I find my usual little place of sleep and go to bed, and that's the end of week 7. Tom signing off.